Tales from the Trenches. Stories forged in the fires of experience. This episode brought to you by Lennox, a leader in energy-efficient climate control solutions for the HVACR industry. Learn more at lennox.com. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. So today we're spending time with Dave Nichols, the training manager for Lennox Learning Solutions. How you doing, Dave?
I'm great. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. We're trying to build a larger inventory of our Tales from the Trenches stories. And you and I got onto a really good topic that I think we're going to call the evolution of the HVAC contractor.
Okay.
So when I got into the industry, in the late 90s in a small family-owned refrigeration and HVAC company. So a lot of mom and pop restaurants. I did a lot of school corporations as well, but we also worked on all of our neighbors' furnaces and air conditioners. And so we were a very small contractor, and I had friends that worked at larger contracting companies. But when I first started, we were actually doing all of our invoices in DOS, and all of our customers were on a card catalog. And it was until about 2005. Then we went to Windows.
Wow. You got into the 20th century.
I got into the 20th century. And as we start talking about how technology is changing and training is changing and equipment and refrigerants are all changing, I feel like I'm back in that stage when we were phasing out a lot of our CFC equipment in the commercial side. Yep. And there was a lot of turmoil because there were a lot of contractors that were just saying, I don't want to do this. I think I'll just retire. But then you had other companies going, I think I'll take advantage of this. And that's kind of what I did. I created a little niche in my industry where I wanted to work on equipment that nobody else would work on, whether it was refrigerant wise or whether it was on controls. Mm-hmm. And it did well for me. And I think we're there again. I think as contractors, we're going through a large transition, and you could tell me all about that. You've witnessed a variety of changes within our industry.
Oh gosh, yes. I remember in the 80s when Lennox first came out with the Pulse furnace, the first 90% furnace on the market, and somebody then said, "Well, I guess this is the best we're going to get." And me being the smart aleck I am, turned around and said, "Well, we're not at 100% yet."
No.
Well, Lennox is actually pretty darn close right now. We're at 99.5% efficient in some of our furnaces. Yeah. So it's amazing how things change. I don't think anybody expected a 90% efficient furnace. Gosh, I remember my dad, who was a design engineer for a cooking equipment manufacturer. He had his gas license, so he always worked on our furnace. Now, our furnace back then, I mean, if it was 60% efficient, I would be surprised. And I mean, the simplest thing you've ever seen, right? Basically, a heat anticipator, a fan, and a burner, and just fire it up every now and then and heated the house. Big old clunky thing, big old machine, and big huge ductwork coming up out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now we take a look at the size of furnaces that are 90% efficient, so much more, and you open it up, and it's a little scary with all the wiring and all the technology that's in there. It's kind of like my car. I remember back in the day, I had little British sports cars. I would rip the engine apart, put it all back together again, and it would run. Surprisingly, because I had a whole bunch of nuts and bolts left over. I didn't know where they went. But now I open up the hood of my car and look at it and go, yep, that's an engine, and close the hood back down again because I ain't touching it.
Yeah. And I always make this analogy into that because I'm very much into automotive as well. It's been a passion of mine for as long as I've been able to tinker with vehicles. And I always relate to when we made the transitions from carburation and mechanical timing into fuel injection and electronic timing, and how we had to still work on that same internal combustion engine. We just had to learn the controls that were associated with it. And we're kind of there again in our industry where we've gotten comfortable doing something for so long, working on
Mm.
something for so long, that we've kind of dug our own hole into a comfortable place that we don't want to get out of,
Yeah.
but we're going to have to.
I agree. That's human nature, though, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, when you get comfortable with something, you don't want to see it go away. You
Exactly.
want to
I
hold
want to
on
hang
to it
on
and
to it.
stay there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always thought of in my career is I always have to look for the next best thing and be willing to challenge myself on something new. And quite honestly, it happened to me early in my career. I remember going to some fella who had been with the company for quite a while, and I said, "Hey, I just came up with this new way of doing this. I think it might, save you a lot of time, make it easier for you if you did it this, and this." And he looked at me and goes, "Nope." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "No." I said, "I've been doing it this way for 30 years. Why would I change now?"
Wow.
And I walked away and thinking, if I ever get like that, just shoot me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Complacent.
you've got to be open
Yeah.
to new ways of doing things, new concepts, new ideas. Let's face it, here you and I are, we're talking across computers. We're actually looking at each other as if we're in the same room. But,
Yeah.
you know, 10 years ago, I don't know that we could do this.
No, not, and definitely not have the quality that we have now.
Right.
Yeah. And so even from the diagnostic side, we have service tools that are allowing this kind of capability. We have, installation and commissioning assistance from technology that is just changing the way we look at our industry. And I was at a training class down at Oak Ridge National Lab last week. Jason Objute and I were down there, and one of the contractors that was working on the facility, a union contractor,
Mm.
came up to me afterwards and he said, I've been listening to you guys' show. I've been trying to tell my management that this refrigerant transition is coming, and they think it's like 5 years down the road, and I'm afraid that they might fail. And
Wow.
yeah, and I said, well, that's really why we're doing this.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about being comfortable with changes and transitions and seeking the education that you need if you don't have a comfortable or familiarness with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, you and I have both been through refrigerant changes in the past. It's going to be like a falling off a cliff at the end of this year versus what it was like when we went from R22.
Yeah, we look at 22 when we're talking in the 90s, it wasn't finishing its phase out until 2020.
Yes,
And
exactly.
now that with our HFC phase down, we're looking at 2036, and it's not even going to last that long because we've
No.
already hit our 40% reduction. We got another 30 coming in a couple years. By the time we hit that, there's not going to be much HFCs left. And that's if we reclaim properly.
Yeah,
Which we
exactly right.
don't do.
Exactly right. So we have to be prepared. I mean, and I fear that the industry has sort of set itself up with the way we did it in the past to the way it's going to happen this time, and I think a lot of people are going to get some shock.
Yeah, I do too. So let's think about this from like a contractor's perspective.
Sure.
There were processes that have changed. Like one of the things that we had talked about is if we look at a contractor from 20 years ago,
Yep.
whatever service industry you were in, the focus was very much on that commitment to your consumer. And it was a relationship between your consumer. And if you had an appointment for a particular time, you spent a lot of time making sure that you were there at that appointment time. And that
Yep.
has kind of changed, and definitely since COVID.
Yeah. I'm distressed that there are so many companies in the industry, whether it's our industry or just in the service industry in general, that when somebody calls looking for somebody to come to their home to perform some level of service, they're given a window that is still maybe 4 hours. And in one instance, I had somebody give me an 8-hour window recently,
Wow.
and that is so frustrating to the consumer. So think about this. The cable companies get a bad rap, but I mean, they give you a 4-hour window of when they're going to show up, and you know darn well that guy's not going to show up until the end of that window. But as a consumer, you have to hang on because you never know, that guy might show up at the beginning of the window. So it's a crapshoot. And then when that person does show up, they don't communicate effectively. They don't let you know that they're happy to be there. It's kind of mundane job, and they're almost miserable. And the homeowner is not happy because they're stressed out with the challenges. And really and truly, one of the things I used to tell my techs is when they get to the door, the first thing they got to fix is the homeowner.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you go look at the equipment, and then you communicate with the homeowner, let them know what it is you found, what you're doing, and all of that kind of stuff. And, technicians tell me they hate to have a homeowner with them while they're working. Well, gosh, show and tell is the best way to build value. If you don't want somebody looking over your shoulder, tell them what you're doing. Because when they have confidence that you know what you're doing, and that you're actually going to look after them, they might well go away. But if they don't know, if you don't give them that confidence, they're going to sit there and watch you forever.
Yeah. So true. I used to be in technical support, and whenever I was working with someone getting involved with technical support, I'd always taught them that, the job is called technical support, but it's really technician support.
Yes.
And if you're talking to a homeowner, it's not necessarily customer service, it's customer support.
Yes.
And then you gain the service. And that has definitely escaped us, particularly since we were talking earlier, since, 2019 to 2020 was a transitional period in customer service, unlike any other. And we can make a very clear definition between that. And so as contractors, as technicians, especially if you're a very young technician and you don't know what we're talking about, there was a time before 2020 where people really focused on each other a lot more. Would you say so?
Yeah, I think so. I think our ability to communicate has deteriorated.
Yes.
I was talking with somebody the other day. We go whenever we go out for dinner, or even if we're eating dinner at home, we never have our phones near us, right?
Yep, absolutely.
We're actually talking with one another.
Yep.
But how often do you go to a restaurant and a family of four is sitting at a table and every one of them is staring at their phone? Now, I mean, there's no companionship. There's no relationship being built. Nobody talks anymore. They text one another, and it's all short forms. And the English language, any language, it doesn't have to be English that you're speaking, but whatever language you're speaking, it can be such a vibrant language, and so much can be shared with one another just by talking and having great ideas. And I fear that we get so tied up in technology that we have forgotten how to communicate effectively.
I know when I was growing up as a contractor, that was one of the things that was pounded into me was communication. Yeah, even outside of work. So my father-in-law at the time was a Freemason and was very active in masonry, and encouraged me to be a part of that, to learn proper communication. And that's actually really where I learned communication skills. But I was able to take those communication skills that I was learning and then bring them back to work. And then I became an effective communicator with my customers, and it changed my career completely.
Sure. Yeah. I had a similar situation, not quite like that, but I was encouraged to get out and speak to groups more. When you're trying to get a point across to a group of people, you have to be able to communicate effectively. Otherwise, that you lose the audience behind. And so one of the things that I've learned is you have to connect the dots for people.
Yes.
You might understand from A to Z, how you're going to get there, but unless you actually take people along the journey with you, not everybody's going to make the connection like you will.
Our very own Eugene Silverstein says, "You don't know the topic until you can teach it to a third grader." And that really makes sense.
There you go. Good point.
And I love that. The first time I thought about it, I was like, not really, not that well. Maybe that makes sense, because you have to be able to explain it in a way that someone who has no knowledge that is similar to yours could comprehend what you are saying.
Yeah.
And so breaking that communication barrier it can be a challenge, but it's well worth investing in yourself to learn that. Because there was times where we spent a lot of time communicating to each other and communicating to customers. And I also feel like that has changed in the last few decades.
I think so. Well, I think if you're going to sell somebody anything, doesn't matter whether it's product or service or whatever it is, you have to build value.
Mm.
And there's only one way to build value, and that is to effectively explain to homeowner what it is they're going to get, how you go to business, what you're going to do for them, what the benefit is that they're going to get from whatever service you're providing. And if they understand the value, then they're more than prepared to pay the price. But if they're not prepared, if they don't understand the value and you haven't built the value, and they don't understand the benefits, it all comes down to price, and you leave so much money on the table at that point.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I'm sitting here thinking about the exact same analogy to contractors looking at the changes that are happening in our industry. And if I'm a contractor that is not embracing change and talking and learning and using communications to become better educated on their products, they could literally lose out on a sale just because of a lack of communication. If they don't understand the transitions that are happening, they don't understand the education that could potentially be needed with the new products, they may not be able to build that confidence in the consumer.
Correct. Well, and think about this: how many people who are talking to a homeowner can effectively tell the homeowner about their business?
Hmm.
So I use this as an example. My wife one time had somebody into the house, and she said to the person, like, and of course, I mean, she did know what I did for a living, so it
Mm-hmm.
it
Right.
didn't help much. She sort of baited the guy, but she said, "Tell me about your business. Tell me about your company." And he said, "Well, it's a small company, and I guess that's the way we like it. So that's all there is."
Hmm.
Well, you know, what did she learn? What did he share?
No.
Nothing.
What's the value proposition?
Exactly. So, I mean, I think you need to be able to explain to the homeowner, like a brief history of the company, how long it's been in business. It doesn't matter whether it's small or large. Each one can bring a different value to the homeowner. Be able to explain that, and how you go to business, and when you're talking to somebody, talking about the training that is put on by the business, and the fact that they're licensed and have insurance and pull permits and things like that. That's huge value. And if you're able to do that, your competition isn't. So you've already built something that the competition can't
Mm.
build, which means the competition is going to navigate or gravitate to the price, the lowest possible denominator, right? Whereas you're building value, and you're going to generate better income, more profitable business than the other guy.
You're talking about training in a conversation that we had. I think it's extremely important to talk about because a lot of contractors may not understand the potential that there is in that. There was a time where manufacturer training was really just focused on specific equipment changes. If I was getting training from my manufacturer, I was going to learn what has changed since the previous model of equipment that I have been
Yep.
working on.
Yep.
And that has made a shift at Lennox.
It
And I'd
has.
love for us to talk about that a little bit.
Well, in our small group, we're kind of a business within a business. We provide skill-based training. So, as an example, we have two levels of build attack. So we are encouraging contractors to go out, hire somebody green, maybe some technical capabilities,
Right.
but
No
hire
industry
somebody,
experience.
no industry experience, somebody with the right attitude, and give them to us for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, they'll come out of the class with an EPA certificate. They'll have a chance to challenge their NATE Ready to Work certificate, and they will be ready to go get in a truck and start running maintenance calls all day long
Hmm.
and do tune-ups on furnaces and air conditioners very professionally. After a period of time, and they're ready to move on into a service situation where they become a service tech, bring it back to build a tech level 2, and after 3 weeks of that, they will have an opportunity to challenge their NATE certification with specialties, and they'll be ready then to start actually properly diagnosing problems with the furnace or the air conditioner and knowing what they need to do in order to fix it. And so purely a skill-based product. Now, in our labs, it's all Lennox products, so we're teaching them on Lennox product. But let's face it, the heating cycle or the air conditioning cycle, the cooling cycle is primarily the same, no matter who makes it, right? So we're really teaching the skill, and we do the same thing on the sales and business side. We teach people how to properly sell in this industry, giving homeowners 4 options, not just one. Let the homeowner choose what works best for them, identifying what their wants and their needs are, identifying what the house actually needs, and putting it all together, presenting some options to the homeowner, let the homeowner choose. And I think too many people in the industry take that off away from the homeowner, and today's consumer doesn't want to be sold to. They want to know what their choices are, and they want to make choice. And we have to remember that they're the people that are actually going to pay the money.
True.
And as long as we build value, and the consumer believes that the value that they're getting is worth the price they're paying, they'll pay it. It's not all about lowest possible price. They want something that's going to work, that's going to make them comfortable in their homes, and they're prepared to pay for that.
Yeah, indeed. All comes down to just being prepared for our consumer and being willing to evolve.
Yes.
Really
yes. Yeah. Let's we talked about that earlier, and how this business has evolved since the 1980s through to now. I've been in the business a long time, but when I start talking about the 1980s, but as I said to you earlier, I remember when Lennox came out with the first 90% efficient furnace called the Pulse, and everybody thought that we'd hit the maximum back then. Now we're talking about 99% efficient furnaces. Amazing.
Yeah, new technologies, new transitions.
Yeah.
Dave Nichols, it was wonderful talking to you. I really look forward to the opportunity to get to meet you and hang out in a classroom. And by the way, in the early 2000s in my area, I was one of 2 people. My mentor and I were the only technicians in about 3 counties that could work on a Lennox Pulse.
Well, there you go.
I've set pressures many times and changed diagrams. Well, sir, it was wonderful talking to you, and we'll be talking again soon.
I look forward to it. Have a great rest of your day.